Hello, everyone. Welcome on into OneSoccer.ca. Andy Petrillo alongside Gareth Wheeler, Oliver Platt. What a night that it was last night. Gareth, you were busy covering CF Montreal and their journey in CONCACAF Champions League, which we're going to get into in just a moment. Ollie and I were busy for the first ever televised Canadian Championship draw for 2022. Pretty excited to see the preliminary matchups as well as the quarterfinals, and also to know who's home and away. We're going to dive into that a little later on in the show. But yes, let's begin with CONCACAF Champions League, because as you know, when you become the Canadian champion, you earn a berth into this very tournament, which is a really big deal. And right now, CF Montreal into the quarterfinals, taking on Cruz Azul. 1-0 was the final last night, Gareth, in that game that you called. Not easy in the Azteca, but some would argue maybe that's a flattering scoreline to CF Montreal, because if you watched it the first half, not very good. So I'm going to bring back one of our favorite games, which I think we still are trying to figure out how it works. Either or. Here we go,
yes.
Ollie. I'm going to start with you.
I'm on board.
Either Montreal
or
okay. Either Montreal demonstrated a gritty, bend but don't break defense, or Cruz Azul demonstrated horrific finishing in front of goal.
I got to take the or on this one. It was the finishing, right? Like, I think like there was some great last ditch defending in moments from Montreal. There was a couple of very good saves from Sebastian Breza, but you don't really want to be doing last ditch defending. You don't want your goalkeeper to be making unbelievable saves to keep you in the game. So they weren't in a great spot. I think particularly for that first half, as you mentioned, Antuna was just giving their left side all kinds of problems. It was definitely a bit of a risk, I think, from Wilfred Nancy to move Joel Waterman over to, his offside, and then have Basong, who I think has struggled a little bit this season as well, playing alongside each other, and Cruz Azul exploited it. But look, 1-0, like, they've been through 6 rounds, they've been knocked around the ring a bit, they got a bloody nose, but they're still on their feet, right? And they're coming back to Montreal, I think, with a much better opportunity to get something from that game than they ever had at Azteca. So I actually look at that result, particularly after they've been dominated to that extent. I think it's a good result for Montreal, and they'll be feeling pretty good today.
It's a great result. I'm with Ollie with the or here, because Cruz Azul, it should have been 3 or 4 at the half. It was just incredible, the misses. I think that they desperately missed Jonathan Rodriguez. He was their top striker from a season ago. One of the lead scorers in Liga MX. He's packed up and gone to Saudi Arabia to collect a paycheck. And then without him, I think they lacked that number 9. They lacked some real cutting edge in front of goal, and they suffered. It turned into an either, by the way, because I think Wilfred Nancy and the changes that he made, bringing on Kamal Miller, bringing on Thorkelson. Newsflash, maybe you want to have left-footed players playing on the left side of defense. Like Waterman, it was a nightmare for him on that left, and Basong was way, way, way off. It wasn't even close, but the changes were good. And then it turned into an either where they played a lot better, bend or not break, for the last 25 minutes of the game, and Cruz Azul looked like they completely lost it. And now they have a real chance going into this game. Like Martinez, the right back, came off with a hamstring. Baca, the holding midfielder, he's suspended for the next game. So you get Kyoto back next game for CF Montreal. So, yeah, they rode their luck. They were very fortunate that Cruz Azul couldn't finish their breakfast. But at the end of the day, the 1-0, you take that every day of the week.
There was a lot of either's and ors in there, so I'm not quite sure where you stood. But here's another one for you, Gareth. Either CF Montreal wins like 2 at home to advance to the semifinals, or they lose by multiple goals at home and they're out.
It's an either. They love playing on that crappy carpet inside that crappy stadium known as the Big O. Honestly, it's a situation that kind of plays in their favor. Like Cruz Azul is not going to like it. They're a team that's struggling right now in Liga MX. They're down to 6th place in the table. The expectations are far better. They have some injuries in the side. Cruz Azul is not going to like this trip up to Canada. And with the way that MLS sides have played at home in this competition, this year especially, I think it puts CF Montreal in a very good place, playing in familiar surroundings, and again, something that Cruz Azul will not like.
Yeah, totally different game back in Montreal. Cruz Azul, they lost the semi-final at home last season, but that's like their only loss at home in the Champions League in the last decade. The entire history of the competition, I think you can count their home defeats on the fingers of one hand. So away from home, it's a different story. Their record on the road is much more mixed. And I think that's what we see quite a lot from some of these Mexican teams, is that they do kind of rely on the home games. They try and, get a draw away from home, just keep it close away from home, and then do their business at home. And Cruz Azul haven't done that, right, in that first leg by only getting 1 goal. So like I said, I think Montreal's in a decent position here if they can reproduce something like the performance we saw against Santos Laguna at the Big O.
Overarching topic here, we've discussed it, I would say, for years now, but it's still one that I feel people want an answer to, hence why it keeps coming back up. So how about this, Ollie? For MLS teams, the CONCACAF Champions League is either a great opportunity to compete against the best teams in the region, or it's an exercise in futility that also derails the start of their MLS seasons.
I don't think you can deny that there's risk there, right? And that it can derail your season if, you do go deep in the Champions League and you add those games to your schedule, and it has a knock-on effect. It clearly, by this point, you look at the results, particularly the weekends directly after teams have played Champions League games, like they're consistently bad. And so you can dig yourself a hole where you have a bad start in MLS in terms of your record through the first month or two of the season. Your preseason's been a bit weird because you've been preparing for Champions League and you just never quite get going and you never quite recover. We've seen that from multiple teams, including obviously TFC in 2018. But I don't want to say it's an exercise in futility, because I think these teams can win this competition. And for the first club that is able to do that in this current format, and the format that won't be around in a couple of years' time, like that's going to be something special. That's going to be a piece of history that I think every single MLS team should want to chase. TFC have got very close. Montreal has been close in the past. And I think someone is going to be, hopefully even closer and hopefully winning it this season when you look at the field of MLS teams we've got and the results they've just gotten in this first set of quarterfinals. So it's not an exercise in futility, but it does present complications for sure.
It is a great opportunity for MLS sides. Look, this is like a stated objective of Don Garber in the league, to get one up on Liga MX, the historically dominant league in CONCACAF. Like, I think this shows growth. I think it provides legitimacy in terms of quality, especially in the eyes of a lot of, Hispanic fans across the United States who still have attachments, still have ties to their Liga MX side that they support. But now it's about having these individuals come on board, and start supporting their local clubs in the United States. This absolutely matters in terms of the overall build of MLS and where they want to go. And look, I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I don't think a Liga MX side is making the semifinal of this year's CONCACAF Champions League. I don't think one of them.
Isn't that the next round?
Yeah, but none of them are advancing here. New York City, they're going to beat the Guatemalan side. Revolution's going to beat Pumas. Seattle Sounders are going to beat Santos Laguna, and all that it comes down, Club Leon, and all it comes down to is CF Montreal doing the job, which I think they will against Cruz Azul, and that will be a shot in the arm for MLS and an absolute indictment on the state of Liga MX and the problems in Mexican football today.
I love bold predictions. Yeah, I think what just has bothered a lot of people who appreciate the MLS game is the timing of it, right? Because a lot of the Liga MX clubs, they have
an advantage.
Yeah, they have that advantage, kind of being in that midseason form, where for a lot of these teams, they're coming straight out of their training camp with not any real regular season games under them. So it's always kind of been a disadvantage in that sense. All right, Gareth, let me ask you this. Either CF Montreal's Joel Waterman has played himself into John Herdman's squad for Canada's March World Cup qualifiers, or take a chill pill, Andy. Way too much at this point.
Take a chill pill, Andy, but maybe just take half of it, cut it in half, and save the other one for later. Because Waterman's done really well. Before he finds himself in the mix for the Canadian men's national team, he needs to lock down a regular starting role. Alistair Johnston, Kamal Miller across that back line, Rudy Camacho, a preferred option as well. But Waterman's put himself right in the mix. Not the quickest player, but I think he's showing a lot of composure, still a decent age at 26. But if there's a CF Montreal player that I think is more in line for a call-up to the Canadian men's national team, that would be Mathieu Chouanière. Unfortunately, was dealing with a little bit of an injury, couldn't play last night, and you noticed him without him in the team, there was a noticeable drop-off. You can't tell me that he's inferior to some of the other options at that position that John Herdman's called in. Even his teammate, Zachary Broguillard. I think that Chouinier's played better. Christian Gutierrez. So I think that Chouinier, the way that he's played, as long as he's fit, he's more likely to be the next Montreal player to get a call-up rather than Waterman.
Yeah, I agree. I think Waterman needs just a bit more time. That it's still just the defensive consistency, I think, can improve from him. He's fantastic on the ball. We all know that. He has all the qualities of a modern centre-back, but just that ability week in, week out to be defensively really solid. He has great moments defensively, don't get me wrong. He's capable of it. It's just the consistency that I think still needs to be there. But that being said, maybe that's the case when we're talking about Canada's starting lineup and getting minutes for Canada. But if you are a defender and you're playing regularly week in, week out at MLS or an equivalent or higher level, you're in the mix, right? Like Canada doesn't have enough defenders of that quality for us to say that he couldn't potentially be in the squad if he continues to play every week for Montreal.
Couple more MLS here. This is a pretty easy one here, Ollie. All three Canadian teams are in action this weekend in MLS. Which is most likely to get a win?
Has to be Vancouver, I think, just looking at the schedule. Montreal going to New York City away. That's a really tough one. Columbus, I think, where TFC are visiting. They're playing well, right? Like they managed to throw away 2 points against San Jose at the weekend somehow. But what we've seen in their performances, both in that game and against Vancouver as well, they look pretty good right now. So I have to look at just the weakest opponent, which I think is Houston. And I think the Whitecaps could go there and potentially grind something out. I don't think it's going to be very pretty with the Whitecaps at the minute. At least it hasn't been through the first couple of weeks of the season. But that's one I look at where I think you have to circle it as one of those opportunities to get a road win.
It's Montreal. Montreal's the correct answer here. Look, New York City FC has a Champions League game this upcoming week, and they have to travel to Guatemala. They were just in Vancouver. They're not playing at home. They're playing in Hartford, a place where there was actually more fans cheering for the Communication than they were cheering for the home side. It was like a 90 to 10% like advantage for the away side. This isn't home field advantage. New York City FC is playing at an absolute deficit here. You get Kyoto back in the team. I think that Montreal is deep enough where Wilfried Nancy can rotate. I think that's part of the thought process, not starting the likes of Kamal Miller down in Mexico. So let's go. Montreal can beat the reigning champions this weekend. I just don't trust Vancouver. They haven't shown me enough that they can travel away from home against a team that's conceded 1 goal through 2 games and actually go on and find the back of the net. They need to prove it to me. Montreal's to play this weekend.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that neither of you chose Toronto. And it's not just because they're coming off a 4-1 loss to New York. But I mean, you look at that back line, it kind of does seem like a band of misfits. And it's also received another blow here, Gareth. So defender, the new center back, Carlos Salcedo, has been retroactively suspended for a foul in the 60th minute in that game Saturday. Does that sit well with you?
No. Look at the banner right there. Does Gareth agree with the decision to suspend Carlos Salcedo? No! This is insanity. Disco is out of control in Major League Soccer. I get retroactive punishments for things that may have been missed during the game, like a player going in punching someone behind the scenes or, making contact with an official. Like there's certain circumstances where, retroactive punishment absolutely makes sense. This is an embarrassment right here, because this was reviewed on VAR for multiple minutes on the field by the official who decided that Salcedo's challenge on Klimala wasn't worthy of the player being sent off in that moment. He stayed on the field. So now you're outwardly questioning the capability of the referee on the field to make that decision in that moment. Look, he could have very well been sent off. I wouldn't have even complained at that time. But the fact that we had to endure that review on the field, then they go back to suspend him for the next game, which is actually a bigger punishment for Toronto FC than the player actually being sent off at that time in the 4-1 game. It's a joke. Like, they need to stop overstepping. They need to stop over-legislating. This is ridiculous. And now because of it, Toronto FC is without their best defender this weekend. It's not right, especially when he stayed on the field when it was reviewed in the first place. Am I missing something here? It seems insane to me.
It's ludicrous. Gareth's right. I agree with him that it's just overstepping at this point. But this is where we're at right now, right? We, a few years ago, we only have ourselves to blame because as fans, as media, coaches, players, we all decided that we couldn't just grow up and accept that the referees are human beings. we couldn't accept that the referees are human beings, and sometimes they're going to get stuff wrong and they're going to miss stuff, and we have to deal with it because that's a part of the sport. It was just too much for us to take because we're all babies about it, and so we gave the refs a load of abuse. Everyone's complaining about it. Every post-game show on every TV station all over the world covering football discusses refereeing decisions in minute detail, and this is what we've got. We've got VAR, we've got retroactive reviews that we just don't need and are totally pointless. And we've ended up with this mess of officiating, which I think is worse than it ever has been.
Well, Ollie, don't you know the people doing the finger pointing? They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. These people.
I'm sure I've been guilty of it as well. I'm not absolving myself though.
You're right. We're trying to make something very black and white. We're trying to create machines, and then we complain about the machines that we created. Here's a bonus one for you, Gareth. Fair to say, things are not going very well for two superstars, Cristiano Ronaldo and Manchester United, sitting fifth right now in the standings. They have some work to do, but we also know that what another sad exit for PSG as well in Champions League, and they made a lot of big signings. A big one being Lionel Messi. Well, I mean, you just look at the history. I mean, losing in a final, losing in semis, round of 16, they just can't seem to get it right. But this is the question here, Gareth. Which of these two, sure, they're aging, but they're mega stars and they can still get things done on the pitch. Which of these two do you think will be the first to join Major League Soccer?
It's a great question, Andy. Look, it was actually kind of refreshing to see some criticism levied Lionel Messi's way based on his performance, because it seems like just Cristiano Ronaldo is the player that everyone just likes to pick on when he has a dip in form. So that was refreshing. To be honest with you, I think MLS could use both players. They have a television contract coming up at the end of the year. That would get eyeballs on the league. Genuine superstar players, albeit past their prime, but still players that can do a job in Major League Soccer. And while I think Lionel Messi's the player that's more likely to come to MLS, spending his time after he won Copa America last summer in Miami, he seems destined to end up there at some point in Argentina, and Higuain already there. Like, I think it's in the stars. I think Cristiano Ronaldo would be the more effective player in Major League Soccer. Ronaldo's 37. He scored 15 goals in 30 games this year in a better league than Lionel Messi's playing it. Like, everyone's like, well, Cristiano Ronaldo's only scored 1 goal in 2022. That's 1 goal in 9 games. Messi's got 1 goal in 8 games, and he's out of the Champions League, the only competition that he's there to play in. Messi has been a miserable failure with PSG. His work rate is awful. It doesn't look like he's committed. I think he has one eye on the exit anyways. Ronaldo can still play. He's still competitive. Those 15 goals, like, he scored in every game in the Champions League but his last one. Manchester United don't make it out of the group if Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't as good as he was in the early stages of the Champions League. And I still think he has a role to play. But in MLS, guess who else came to MLS when he was 37 years old? Zlatan Ibrahimovic. What did he do? Scored 53 goals in 58 games. I think Cristiano Ronaldo can be even better than that in Major League Soccer. Having that talisman, that number 9, a player that commands that kind of respect, and a player who still is exceptionally competitive on a game-to-game basis. I think Ronaldo would be a smash hit in Major League Soccer.
I hope it's Messi, just because Gareth's right. Like, watching him, it's like watching me play five-a-side, just wandering around, taking a deep breath every 10 seconds. It looks like he needs one. Like, it's ridiculous. And we're hitting the two things that get me going the most here in a row, VAR and PSG. I just can't stand watching one of the greatest players of all time playing for this team. This team is a bunch of jokers. I'm sorry, they are. Like, at least for Ronaldo, even in a difficult time at Manchester United, playing for Manchester United still means something, right? Like, that's still a club where you feel like they're getting it all wrong, but they're trying to win. PSG, I think the biggest day of PSG's year isn't when they win a big game or get to a final. It's when they make their big summer signing and they hold up their nice Michael Jordan jersey and they take photos and everyone says, how great they are. Like, it's just... I just find the whole thing, the amount of money that they spend to achieve basically nothing. Like, they didn't even win their league title last year, despite massively outspending everyone else in their country. I can't stand them, to be honest. I was cheering for Real Madrid for the first time in my life last night. And I really dislike the fact that Lionel Messi, as I said, in my opinion, the greatest player of all time, is wasting the last few years of his career just kind of wandering around doing nothing at this club.
Yeah,
so you want to see him wandering around doing nothing with Inter Miami?
Sure, it'll be better than what we've got right now.
Well, here's a question I always like to ask it, and don't get me wrong, I always think obviously big names are big names for a reason, and they can change a complexion of a team. But you always have to ask: Are you making the move to win, or are you making that move because you want to win the press conference? Congratulations, PSG! Like, you won the press conference, but have they come together? Like, and did you actually win?
Sorry, but who is like 2 goals up in a Champions League knockout tie and leaves Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi on the pitch for that last 20 minutes? And that I don't even think that's on Pochettino.
I don't think he has a choice.
Exactly. That's what it's like at PSG, right? It's a totally ludicrous situation.
Well, let's bring it back home, gentlemen. And as I mentioned off the top of the show, for the first time ever, the Canadian Championship draw was televised. We had it right here on OneSoccer. Dwayne De Rosario, Patrice Bernier joined us. It was great to have the two of them on. I like the little jabs, right? Because as we know, D-Ro, a Canadian champ with Toronto FC. Patrice, he was a Canadian champ with Montreal. It was pretty special. The two of them, friendly jabs, but they stayed on their sides. Let's put it this way. So, Gareth, what were your impressions of the draw format?
It was awesome. D-Ro brought the bling. Patrice brought the class. You had the red dress on, top notch. Ollie looked sharp. Our boy Richard Scott doing a great job overseeing proceedings. Like, I think that when you add that level of professionalism to the broadcast, it just makes everything seem more grandiose. And it is right now for the Canadian Championship. We've never been at a position with this many teams, this many good players capable of going to, on and providing a legitimate fight for the Voyageurs Cup. So this is where we're at in terms of the footballing landscape in this country. Once a couple other, expansion teams come to the Canadian Premier League, this thing is continuing. It will continue to grow out. These are really exciting times, and I just thought all of you did a wonderful job on the broadcast. Hey, and I didn't have to be part of it whatsoever, so it was even better for me just to sit and watch from home.
I'm sure there was a few Gareth Wheeler goal calls mixed in there and
probably
somewhere.
Apologies.
Yeah. Has to be.
Not my decision.
All right, gentlemen. Well, when the three of us are reunited, it's absolutely a shock to nobody that we start to go heavy here. So we're going to fly through these likely or unlikely, because we like talking to each other. We truly are buddies talking the game here. But let me begin with you. So let's do this quickly, right? Ollie, likely or unlikely, Vancouver Whitecaps versus Valor FC is the must-watch match of the first round?
Likely, I think so, just because we always are drawn when an MLS team plays a CPL team, right? And that's the first one we'll get in this year's competition. I also just think, sorry, I'm supposed to be quick here, but Valor, they've been around for 3 years now, haven't had much success, haven't played a playoff game. They have a really fantastic fan base in Winnipeg that I don't think gets as much credit as they should do. They're finally going to have a big game, right? I know it's not at home, and that would have been ideal, but they're going to have a game that's really meaningful, that really gives them the opportunity to put Winnipeg on the map a little bit. So I'm excited for them as well. And that's definitely my first round game to watch.
I was going to go in a different direction, but I'll agree that this is likely the best matchup. It is, something to do with the Whitecaps' history of losing to Canadian Premier League teams in this competition. But it's two coaches facing off against one another who are very familiar with one another. They're part of the same coaching staff with the Vancouver Whitecaps, with my boy, Big Phil, and Vanni Sartini. Like, Phil DeSantos, he was the number 2. He was there with his brother, Mark DeSantos. Sartini was part of that staff. They know each other and the way they play inside and out. So, there might be some insider trading going on. It just adds that other extra layer of intrigue ahead of this game.
Likely or unlikely that CF Montreal, Gareth, is the MLS team most likely to get knocked out early?
Unlikely. I can't say likely when the Vancouver Whitecaps are playing a first-round game before CF Montreal will play, and the fact that Vancouver Whitecaps have never beat a Canadian Premier League team in this competition before. It's got to be the Whitecaps who are most likely to be knocked out. Valor, I think they're going to be decent, and I expect Cavalry to dispatch of FC Edmonton, and Cavalry is going to be a really good team, and they've beat the Whitecaps before, so Vancouver's the only answer here.
Yeah, unlikely. It's got to be Vancouver, right? They've got no track record of managing these kinds of situations. They've really struggled, and they got to do it twice. Montreal and Toronto have only got to navigate potentially one of those CPL teams. So it's Vancouver.
Well, we know Rob Friend, CEO of Pacific, was already very quick to say that, they're circling the semifinal. He's already assuming Pacific's going to go. He's already assuming Vancouver's going to be there. That's who he wants to meet. Likely or unlikely, Ollie, Guelph actually has the best chance to pull off a shocking upset. As we know, no semi-pro team has ever won in the Canadian Championship.
I'm going to say unlikely because I'd still lean towards Valor potentially pulling off an upset against Vancouver. But at the same time, I think you can make a case for Guelph. I think Halifax, we've seen, doesn't travel that well. They're never a team that really blows other teams away. They're always in close games, and that leaves you at a little bit of risk in situations like these. So I could see Guelph having a go. But I'll stick, I think, with Valor upsetting the Whitecaps and continuing that horrible run of theirs.
Likely. I'm jumping on the Guelph bandwagon, and we'll figure out what their squad actually looks like. But as of now, there's 4 players with Canadian Premier League experience, and Elvis, and Soppels, who's a good player, Springer, and a former Halifax Wanderer, and Scooby Black. So why not?
Right.
Ollie said it, like, Halifax are smoke and mirrors right now. I do not trust this team whatsoever. Ollie, saying they can't travel is an understatement. In 36 games away from Wanderers' grounds, they have 7 wins. 7 wins from 36. Why would I bet on them winning anywhere away from home? Great home field advantage, an absolute nightmare when they travel. Go on, Guelph.
Well, then I don't know what to make of this next likely or unlikely then, because it kind of seems like maybe you're on the Guelph bandwagon. But Gareth, likely or unlikely, Toronto FC at Halifax, because we know that Toronto drew as the away team in the quarterfinal, would be the must-watch match of the tournament. But is it going to be Guelph?
Unlikely. Why? Because Halifax is a great place to play. It's not a great place to play if you absolutely get wiped off the field. We got to look for competitive games here. So, and look, Toronto FC could be traveling down the 401 to Guelph, which would be a great advert for football in the Tri-City area. I think that Guelph, Kitchener, Waterloo, that area is ripe for an expansion side in the Canadian Premier League. And, this could be a really good platform.
I'll say unlikely as well. The must-watch match of the tournament is the final, so I can't answer the question as likely. But I think Halifax hosting TFC, that would be pretty special, right? Like, I just think there's something about the Wanderers grounds. We all know it. We've seen it in the CPL. It's a great place to watch a match of soccer. It's a great place for a cup tie like this as well. I even remember, I think Jonathan Osorio was asked, in the first year the CPL teams came in, who he'd like to play, and he said he'd like to go to Halifax. So he'll maybe get that opportunity this year, and I think it'll be a great match to watch.
Yeah, I think it would be just great to play there. Just from
Forge Montreal, anyone? Like,
yeah, listen,
a match there would be wonderful.
Yeah, we brought that up yesterday. That's for sure. So let's go back to Vancouver here, Ollie. Likely or unlikely that the Whitecaps actually got a favorable path to the Canadian Championship final?
Someone played the tuba?
No, I'm having electrical work done in my house, so they're literally drilling holes in my wall.
Tuba lessons.
My deepest apologies to everyone listening. I'm trying to mute my mic, but Gareth had to call me out. I am now muting again.
It does sound like a 5-year-old has just picked up a wind instrument for the first time. Figuring out the ropes a little bit. The question was the Whitecaps, right? I think you have to say it's a favorable draw because they don't have to play an MLS team till the final. So there's no excuses for Vancouver here. As much as we talk about that past record against CPL teams not being good, which obviously it isn't. Again, you just got to take a look at the budgets difference between these two teams, or the teams in 2 different leagues. Vancouver should be winning these ties. They should have a pathway right through to the final and a chance to play for the Canadian Championship. Anything else for them this season is a failure, and that puts a certain degree of pressure on them, which, let's be honest, they have not handled well in the past.
Pacific FC have the best draw because they avoided Montreal and Toronto, and they're the same side with other CPL teams who you can make the argument they're better than, and the Whitecaps, who they beat last year and can make the argument, can go on and compete with them as well. So let's go Pacific FC, the team with the best draw.
Okay, I like that. Likely or unlikely? So maybe now that you've had some time to think about it, because last night during the draw, everyone got very excited about the provincial rival. So Cavalry taking on Edmonton. But would you say likely or unlikely, Ollie, that that's actually the least exciting first round matchup?
Yeah, I think I would have to, because it's up to FC Edmonton to make this matchup interesting, right? Because the problem has been through the first 3 seasons of the CPL, the Cavalry has just totally dominated it. And so when you're watching these two teams play each other multiple times a year, and the outcome is the same pretty much every single time, the novelty wears off and the interest level wears off a little bit. So it's going to be difficult for Edmonton this year. We all know that. We've been over those reasons many times. But maybe it's an opportunity at the same time with what's going to be a very young team to have a team that plays with spirit, that plays with pace, that really brings some fight to a rivalry like this, which has been so heavily tilted in Cavalry's favor so far.
Let's hope it's not. Like, Holly's right. Based on the way that these two teams have played one another, I'm like, Edmonton has never beat Cavalry since they joined the Canadian Premier League. This has been completely one-sided, but who knows, the magic of the cup, if Edmonton focuses, really and makes this a priority, getting one over on Cavalry in this competition, it could be the most watchable. So I don't think it has to be the case. But if we're going down the road of here we go again, then yeah, that loses that luster. But these are two fan bases that there's a rivalry there, and let's hope that the game is scheduled for a good time where supporters can travel and be there and create an atmosphere. So I think it has the makings of potentially the best, but I'm not sure it will be.
One more, gentlemen. Likely or unlikely, I'll come back to you with this, Gareth. A CPL team will win the Canadian Championship within the next 5 years.
We dealt with this on the show last week, didn't we? Because Andy, I was kind of saying, yeah, why not? Why can't a Canadian Premier League team? But you kind of changed my mind on that. So I'm going to call it
this year. I was talking about this year. I think it'll be harder this year given Vancouver is motivated and they all have proper training camps. They're all back at home. They haven't relocated. But in the next 5 years?
But that's why I'm kind of going in that direction. I still think that there's a lot of room for growth with these Canadian MLS teams. None of them are at their peak right now. I do think that they're a little bit more vulnerable this time around to go on and win it. A lot of things need to go right. And we're also at a time where these MLS clubs, Andy, are bringing through more and more players from their academies, more of their homegrown players who are actually good enough to play and contribute and be difference makers in games like this. So I'll say unlikely. I don't like my answer, but I'll stick with it for now. And it's because of you convincing me, by the way.
I think it's got to be unlikely if we're saying likely, unlikely. I do think that when you look at a team like Forge, though, and what they've accomplished in the first 3 seasons in the CPL, the way they've played in continental football as well, you wouldn't put it past them. And if the question was, can a CPL team make the final, then I'd say that's likely. I think that will happen. And at that point, when you're in the final, you're 90 minutes away, right? So it's certainly not impossible. I think you have to say unlikely, but I'm hopeful I'll be wrong on that.
These MLS teams want to win trophies, Andy. Yeah. It's so hard to win, something in Major League Soccer with 30 odd teams. Like, this is a priority for these MLS teams. Make no mistake about that.
Very true. Gentlemen, we made it through. I'm going to get back to my tuba lessons. That's Gareth Wheeler. That's Oliver Platt. I'm Eddie Petrello. Thanks for tuning in to OneSoccer.ca.